this year I've taken it upon myself to try and create the perfect pair of jeans. And so far I've made 4 pairs of jeans. I started off with the Persephone pants by Anna Allen Clothing. I made them for my Harry Styles video. The construction was really sloppy. I struggled with sewing through denim and I was trying a lot of different techniques. I lengthened the crotch and ended up being too long and I did not like the buttonhole. So then I gave them another crack and I tried them in a different furnishing fabric. I liked these more. I shortened the crotch, but the construction was still a bit funky and the buttonhole was shocking. I could not figure out how to do it on thick fabric. Then I tried the Persephone pants for the 3rd time in my Persephone shorts video, and this time I just sized down completely. I just couldn't get the size right. And unfortunately they were slightly too small and the crotch was too short this time around. But the construction was getting better and I was getting more confident. Then, for my birthday, I made the Helene Jeans by Anna Allen Clothing, and the construction on these was leaps and bounds better. I watched a lot of videos, my technique improved, my stitching was cleaner, and my buttonhole for the first time was delectable, which was very exciting. But they're too big. They're too big around the waist and the crotch is too long. So for the 5th time this year, I'm going to try jeans again. I'm going to size down the Helene jeans. We're going to do a patchwork style, use up all of my scrap denim, and hopefully we can get this fit right. That's my thoughts. Let's get started. First things first, I'm going to cut up the pieces that I have to upcycle. I have tried unpicking before. It's too timey. I'm just gonna cut it and maybe I'll preserve the pockets. My denim's prepped, so I'm just gonna do a mock-up of these pants and see how the fit is. Trail pants are really good. I love them to size down. I think I just want to take them in a little bit in the waist. It's just ever so slightly a bit gapey at the back, and hopefully that'll be a nice snug fit. When I started my small business, I ordered 200 professionally made tags, and I'm down to my last 10 now, which is an exciting milestone. But instead of ordering more, I really wanted to have a play around to see if I could make my own using a Lino Stamp and fabric ink, and I'm pretty excited about the way that it's been turning out. For this project, I stamped that Lino Stamp on the back of an old jeans tag, and I thought it was super cute. And then I got to my quilted patches. And my patches were made up of 4 squares, and the squares were made of 3 by 3, and each of the squares were 3 inches by 3 inches, if that matters to you. But basically what I was doing was making a big piece of fabric that was all patchworked so that I could cut my templates out from that big piece of fabric. You could use one piece of fabric, you could do your own textile fabrication. It's totally up to you what you decide to do. For my jeans, I really wanted to have flower patches on the knees, so I cut out some templates from some old cardstock, and then I got to quilting my fabrication before cutting it out. So to quilt, I just used my lovely patchwork square, and I put some quilting wadding underneath it, and then I just did some straight lines going both ways so that it was a square quilting design. Then I cut out my flower template from that quilting textile that I just created, and also that same template from a lining cotton fabric. Pinned those right sides together, sewed all the way around the outside seam, leaving a small gap so that I could turn my flower right sides out. This process was a little bit fiddly. I recommend snipping off any excess fabric just to make it not bulky. And just take your time when you're turning it right sides out because, yeah, as you can see, it was a little bit of a wrestle. You can use a chopstick or a pen or maybe like the end of a paintbrush to poke out the ends of anything that you sew that you need to flip out the right side out. But I have this amazing tool that I got from my local craft store, and it is just so perfect for this activity. Yes.
After flipping out my flower right sides out and pressing it so it was nice and flat, I just closed up that tiny seam that I left open and it was all good to go.
Now that I've done my 2 knee patches, I'm going to repeat this process, but doing it for the pocket that comes with the Helene jeans so that I have quilted back pockets as well. And also I'm using my scraps from around the flowers to do those pockets. Don't worry, I know you were worried, I got it.
The awesome thing with working with scraps is that you can just keep using them. Even the smallest piece is golden and no one's gonna know that it's a scrap because you're working with scraps, you know what I mean? Like it's a design choice, it's kind of cool. Anyway, whatever. I cut out the pocket patterns from my quilted fabric and I repeated the process that I did for the flowers but with my back pockets. So I cut out lining fabric, I sewed the lining to the quilting right sides together, I snipped the seam allowance, also I left a little gap so I could flip it right sides out. That part is important.
Let's iron this.
And then I ironed it and closed up that little gap.
I've got my big pile of denim here and the plan of attack is I'm just going to lay it down all over each other, put the pattern piece on top, cut it out, and then figure out after the fact a way to sew everything down and together. My setup for the jeans today is a denim needle, and instead of using a heavy thread, like a heavy duty thread, I am using 2 spools of regular thread and they're both coming through together as one thread through the needle. If you're doing this on a domestic, you may have 2 spool holders at the top, which is awesome, but I believe you can also purchase a second spool holder to go next to your machine if you need 2. I'm pretty sure they sell them at Spotlight. My least favourite thing, rethreading the overlocker. I'm doing the hack right now where you tie your new threads to your old threads that are already threaded. And every time I've done it in the past, the threads have not made it through, like they just snap off somewhere along the way and you just have to thread it anyway. But I asked my Instagram followers for some tips and they said you must try putting all of your tensions to 0 and see if that helps. That's what I'm gonna try. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Let's go for it. That may have just worked. Yeah! Oh my gosh! Now that I've patchworked my piece, I'm just gonna put my pattern piece on top just to make sure I haven't got any weird warping or size issues. Okay. 1 pant leg down, 3 to go, and all my other pattern pieces. So I'm just going to repeat this process. Also, the flower, just imagine it. I'm calling it for the night. I've cut out the front 2 legs and sewed them all together, and then I just cut out all of the other bits and bobs, and all I have left to sew together is the back legs, and then we can start, which is awesome because once it's construction time it's pretty straightforward now. It's just the patchworking that requires a lot of brain energy. Hopefully it'll be worth it. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Hey, good morning. It is the second day. I've just cut out my final 2 pattern pieces, which were the back of the jeans, and we are ready to start construction. I just wanted to let you know I found a better way of patchworking. For the first 3 parts of the jeans, I was laying out all of my fabric the way I wanted it to look, then I was cutting out my pattern, and then I was patchworking after the cutting. After patchworking, I would put it back down, put the pattern on top, and then just make sure that there wasn't any discrepancies between the 2 pieces, and there was every single time. Then for the last piece I decided to make my fabrication first. So I made a big rectangle that was bigger than my pattern piece, patchworked it together, and then cut my pattern out from that patchwork piece. And that was a lot easier and quicker. So if you're doing it, I would recommend patchworking that way. I wish I did it for all of mine, but you live and you learn. Anyway, now we finally get to the fun part of construction, so let's get into it.
For this video sewing log, I'm not really going to explain every shot in detail, but I have tried to get a shot of each step so that if you get stuck along the way, you can use this as a little visual reference. If that helps you. But basically, I just followed the steps, and as you've probably heard from me before, I just think Anna Allen clothing patterns are so well thought out. They do not gloss over any details. They do not leave you stranded. I just think if you follow the steps, you can do it. And I just love that feeling. Anyway, here I am working on the zipper and the fly portion of the pants, and I have to tell you something that I really, really think is essential with working with denim is a good press and a good little hammer. Reduce the bulk on those seams with a little bash. It is so helpful, and it's kind of changed the crispness of my denim. Also, this album, guys, I cannot stop listening to it. My favorite song is UFO, and maybe you will like it, I don't know. Anyway, I got back to the zipper, and I used my zipper foot to sew as closely to those teeth as possible, and then I just shimmied that zipper up so that I could keep sewing straight. Then, once you've sewed that down, you can put this fly facing, I think that's what it's called. You sew it down, and then you just sew along that stitching line, so it's the exact same stitching. Back to the jeans. Once I got my zipper installed, then you can just flip over the other side of the pants and sew up that crotch seam. And once that is done, you can press out that seam and start working on the overlap section of the zipper. I wish that I overlapped it just a tiny little bit more. You can still kind of see the zipper teeth on my finished garment, but that's okay, you live and you learn.
How is everybody going? I am up to my hand basting the fly down. I like this part. It feels nice to hand stitch something, and I like making sure that details look good. Trying to be cool about it. That red line is so that I can top stitch and get the shape really clean.
Next on my jean sewing adventure was constructing the pockets and the front portion of the jeans. So you just press those pockets in half, and then I just prepared on these little pieces of fabric where the coin pocket will go, and then I flipped over the raw edges on two of those sides. Then I prepared my coin pocket, which I have to say is the cutest little detail. I'm completely obsessed with it, even though I probably will never use it. And this is just how you prepare a pocket. You just tuck in those raw edges, and it's super easy. Then you pin this little denim guy onto the pocket, the cotton pocket, and sew that down. And honestly, this part is a little bit of brain gymnastics for me, but once you do it once, you understand, if that makes sense. Hopefully seeing these images will help your brain, as it also helps mine. Once you sew that pocket onto the jeans, then you can flip it sort of right sides out. I gave mine the heartiest press because I am obsessed with getting a clean seam. Like, don't even get me started how good this feels to just fold it over, press it, top stitch it. Wow, she's looking clean, she's looking fresh. Once this is top stitched though, then you can start on the French seaming of the pocket bag. French seaming is a really lovely technique in sewing in which you encase the raw edges into the seam so that you will not see them from the wrong side or the right side, and you also don't need an overlocker or a zigzag stitch. It's a really durable technique, and it allows for your garments to have a very polished finish.
Okay, the jeans are coming along. I've finished the front part of them. Now they've got pockets and coin pocket and top stitching. Okay.
Now it was time to get onto the back yoke of the jeans. So I pinned this right sides together to both the left and the right back jeans, sewed it down, overlocked it, pressed it, and top stitched that detail. Then I put my two back panels right sides together and sewed them down the center crotch seam at the back, making sure to align my back yoke pieces so that they were even. Then I pressed that seam, which by the way I did overlock, and I also hammered it to reduce bulk.
I have to say, one of my favourite things about sewing denim is the top stitching. It's so satisfying.
After top stitching, I then put my placement guide dots on the back panels of my jeans. That would show me where my pockets need to go. And then I put them down, pinned them, and sewed them. I sewed at 1/8 of an inch, and then I sewed my parallel line right next to that using my presser foot as the stitching guide. And then my pockets were done.
They're coming along, but I've got this underlying feeling like I'm not going to get too excited until I see that they actually fit. I'm attaching my patches so that I can go ahead and put the front pants together with the back pants. So I guess I have to guess where the knees are. I'm thinking I'm going to try and stitch them down predominantly with the sewing machine. But then there are a few places where the flowers will overlap onto the back, and I think I'll hand stitch them then. I just don't want the edges of the flowers eaten up by the seam. Okay, so my grand idea was to sew down the flowers partially. I just sewed down the parts of the flower that are super in the middle, and then I've tacked down the other petals to the middle so that they don't get caught in the seams. And then once the jeans are constructed, I'm going to figure it out after. It will have to be a hand sew, I think.
The next step was lining up the crotches and pinning the inner seam of the jeans all together, and that was what I was going to sew down so that we had a big jean piece. After overlocking my seam, I then pressed it all to one side so that it was nice and neat for the top stitching. Now, if you're not doing flower applications, if you're even following along with this tutorial, don't worry about the step. It's extra as, and it was a little bit of some fancy footwork. But basically, once I finished the seam, then I was able to top stitch the flower petals down so that they overlapped that seam. I did not want them to get stuck in the seam, and that became very difficult once I got to my outside leg. So I was actually closing up the leg. I closed it up until I got just past that flower, and I left all of the rest of the leg open so that I could access the flower. Then I kind of shimmied my fabric through, and well, it was more of a wrestle, and then I could top stitch those flower petals down. It took some patience and it took some time, but it actually did work. And then once it was top stitched, I could then finish closing up the rest of my leg. If you wanted to make it easier for yourself, you could actually just make those knee patches smaller so that they had no chance of being eaten up by the seam, and that way you could just put the patches on when the jeans were laying flat and you could construct them normally. But I do really feel like it's details like this that give clothes so much interest, and I showed my boyfriend these and I said, look how the flowers overlap this seam, and he was like, that is exactly what I was thinking, how did you do that? And I don't know, that made me feel really excited. I just love that feeling of, how did you do that? And honestly, the answer is always, it was difficult. It was really difficult. And I cried making it. And that's why it looks cool. Anyway, as you can probably tell, there's no audio in these clips. I accidentally put them in slow motion, so I had to speed them up and the audio was lost, and that's why I'm talking to you right now. But basically, once I constructed my pants, I could then put the waistband on and do that top stitching detail, and also construct my belt loops. This is the part of the process where I'm just filled with excitement and joy. Like, it's almost done. I can see the end of the pattern coming up. The wind is blowing through my hair. Oh, you cannot recreate that feeling of satisfaction.
I am done for the day. I've got to go make dinner. I only have the belt loops left and the hem. Anyway, tomorrow morning I will finish everything off camera, and when I speak to you next, they will be done. Yes. Okay, it's the next day and I finished my jeans. Everything is done. I'm really happy with how they turned out. I even had to make a little matching top. Before I show you the finished product, I wanted to talk through some of my top tips for making this pattern. Now that I've made Anna Allen pants 5 times, firstly, definitely invest in a good denim needle. If you're on your domestic, you will not be able to get through it on a regular needle size. Denim needles, essential. Having 2 threads going through your needle as your nice top stitching thread, I highly recommend. I feel like it looks great and it's so much more cost effective than buying that really thick Goodman thread. But if you were rich, go for it. That thread is good. But we're not all in the place to buy Goodman thread every time. That's my little tip and I feel like it does a fantastic job. Hammers. A hammer is an essential part of your denim experience. I only learned this with my last pair of jeans. When you have bulk in the seams, this helps so much to flatten it down so that you can get your sewing machine over the denim. I hammer out a lot of my seams just to make them look crisper, flatter. It's incredible. I'm really happy with how my size grading went. Grading has always been intimidating to me, but I'm glad that I kind of just bit the bullet and tried. I ended up doing a size 2 everywhere and then graded to a size 0 at the waist, but only for the back part of the pants and not the front. And that was just perfect for what I needed it to be. I have to remind myself all the time that there's no points for doing something exactly how a pattern tells you to do it. If you get the result that you want and you did some little fancy footwork to get there, I say go for it. At the end of the day, you're sewing for yourself, so do what you need to do to make things work and make things fit the way you want them. Anyway, if you have any questions about the way that I customized these pants or any of the techniques I use, please leave them in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. I think it's time that I show you my finished result, the jeans and now the top, which was a little bit extra. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you a lot. I hope you are going very well and that your sewing and crochet and knitting projects are coming along very smoothly. And as always, let me know what projects you're working on in the comments. You know I love to hear about them. And that is all. I will see you in the next video. Have a great week. Bye.